What if your diagnosis wasn't the beginning of healing, but the start of a new loop? What if the algorithm that found your pain also started selling you a new identity? Tonight, we're diving into the quiet rise of diagnostic labels, how they soothe, how they stick, and how they sometimes become the very loop we're trying to escape. If this hits somewhere deep, quietly follow. It tells Spotify you're tuning into something real, not just another noise in the scroll. The digital age didn't just change how we communicate. It changed how we see ourselves. Scroll long enough, and you'll find someone who sounds exactly like you. Their tics match yours, their patterns feel eerily familiar. Their caption reads, "I didn't realize I had ADHD until I saw this. I never knew that was an OCD trait." This is how autism shows up in women. And just like that, something clicks. A label, a name, a reason. There's comfort in diagnosis. It untangles the confusion. It tells you you're not broken, you're wired differently. There's power in that clarity. But there's also a trap. Reflection. Algorithms are trained to show you what you engage with. And if that's ADHD content, you'll get more. If it's neurodivergent memes, they'll multiply. Not because you're broken, but because the machine now thinks this is who you are. Suddenly, every mood shift is a symptom. Every late night, a spiral. Every awkward silence, confirmation. You've entered a feedback loop where identity is fed by content, and content is fed by identity. You don't just have ADHD now. You are ADHD. You are OCD. You are your diagnosis. And that can be its own kind of prison. Close for transition. What if the diagnosis was just a tool, not the truth? What if your brain didn't need a name, just a way out? Next up, the second loop, when systems built to help you start optimizing your symptoms instead of healing them. It started with relief. You finally had a word for what you were feeling. ADHD, OCD, anxiety, depression. Suddenly you weren't alone. You were part of something. A tribe, a language, a cause. But somewhere between the carousel posts, pastel infographics, and day in my life with insert diagnosis TikToks, healing became performance, struggle became aesthetic, and identity became content. There's power in being seen. No one's denying that. But here's the question no one wants to ask. What happens when your entire self-worth is wrapped around the thing you're trying to heal from? We've turned mental health into a brand, consciously or not. And once you're known for your ADHD routines or your OCD hacks, what happens if you actually get better? Does your audience vanish? Do you? Is this recovery or just a better filter? Healing isn't linear, but branding is. Branding rewards consistency, simplicity, the kind of clarity real people don't have. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to outgrow a label. You're allowed to be messy, inconsistent, uncertain, and still worthy of love, belonging, and even attention. But the platform won't reward that, because that doesn't perform. If you weren't allowed to talk about your diagnosis tomorrow, who would you be? Would you still recognize yourself?
They said this would help, and maybe it did, at first. The prescription, the hope, the promise of normalcy. For many with ADHD, OCD, depression, or anxiety, medication can be life-changing. It's the bridge to functioning, to stability, to feeling like your brain isn't working against you, every second of the day. But here's the quiet reality behind the scenes. We've built an entire system around treating symptoms faster than we understand root causes. Big Pharma isn't evil, but it is efficient, and efficiency loves subscriptions. How do you know if the meds are working? What if they are? But what if you've just adapted? What if your baseline now depends on them? We don't talk about the loop. The new diagnosis, the new script, the side effects, the countermed, the withdrawal, the rebound symptoms, the dose creep, the tolerance, the questioning, the guilt, and always the fear. If I stop taking this, will I fall apart? Maybe not. Maybe yes. Maybe worse. Maybe you won't know who you are without it. This is not anti-medication. This is pro-awareness. You deserve tools that serve you, not bind you. Rhetorical question for reflection. Are you healing or stabilizing just enough to keep going in the same loop? Is your wellness plan keeping you afloat, or is it also keeping you from swimming further? You should be better by now. That whisper, it's not yours. It's the world's. The world loves a timeline. 3 months for grief, 6 weeks for burnout. 1 year post-diagnosis, you should be thriving. But healing is not linear. There is no universal calendar, only your own nervous system, inching forward on its own messy terms. Think about it. A bone breaks, we wrap it, rest it, and give it 8 weeks. A brain breaks, we rush it back to work after a week of mental health leave. A lifetime of trauma? Have you tried yoga? The pressure to get over it quickly turns healing into a performance. We fake wellness to avoid disappointing others. We relapse silently to protect their optimism. What's wrong with me? I was doing better. No, you were doing your best, and progress isn't always forward. Some days you'll climb. Some days you'll coast. Some days you'll collapse. All of it counts. Healing is a rhythm, not a race. Another reflection question. What if your slowest days are still part of the healing? And what if you're not behind? You're just human. If I'm not useful, I'm nothing. Sound familiar? This is not just overwork. This is performance as protection, a trauma response in disguise. Many with ADHD, OCD, anxiety, or early emotional neglect become productivity machines, not because they love the grind, but because they fear stillness. Stillness invites the voice that says, "You're lazy. You're falling behind. You'll be abandoned." So you push, hypermanage every task, color code every hour, achieve, until your identity is built entirely on output. But here's the twist. Productivity is not healing. It's a mask that fits perfectly over pain. And it's rewarded. Society celebrates burnout as dedication. We wear stress like a badge. And when the body collapses, we call it weakness, not warning. Here's the truth. If you learned to equate worth with work, it wasn't your fault. But unlearning that pattern, that's your revolution. Reflection question. Who are you when you're not performing for anyone? What would it feel like to be enough, even on your laziest day? There's a voice in your mind. You know the one. The one that calls you lazy, that says you'll never get it together, that makes failure feel permanent and rest feel like guilt. It didn't come from nowhere. That voice is often a composite of your early environment, a critical parent, an impatient teacher, a culture that only rewarded perfection, and now it lives inside you, repeating the same script on loop. But here's the radical truth. You can reparent that voice. You don't need to get rid of it. You need to talk to it like someone younger lives there, because they do. Next time that voice says, "You're useless," try this. "Hey, I know you're scared. You think if we stop pushing, we'll fall apart. But we're safe now. I've got you." It will feel awkward, maybe even fake, but that's how rewiring begins. Think of it like this. You've been running an OS built on fear. Reparenting is installing an update, not with logic alone, but with compassion. Every kind word you offer yourself is an act of healing. You were never given, but now get to give. Question to reflect on. What would your younger self say if they saw how hard you've been trying to survive?
We are more connected than ever, but many of us feel more alone than ever. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being physically alone, but the kind that comes from feeling unseen, even when surrounded by noise. Instagram shows you reels. TikTok shows you trends. Spotify shows you mood playlists. But none of these ask how you actually feel. They learn your behavior, not your being. Algorithms optimize for what you click, not what you need. They feed the loop, not the soul. And when you're struggling, depressed, overstimulated, spiraling, you're still served more of the same. Dopamine hits, comparison traps, you're not enough content, all dressed as entertainment. The paradox? You can scroll for 3 hours and still feel like no one's checked in. Real connection doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. But it's the only thing that breaks the loop. A voice note from a friend, a slow walk with no phone, an eye contact that says, "I see the storm behind your smile." Question to reflect on. When was the last time someone really saw you, without a screen in between?
Let's say it clearly. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not weak for struggling in this world. The systems around you are designed for loops, not for healing. They reward urgency, not stillness. They punish uncertainty, not curiosity. They flood you with infinite stimulation, then shame you for not focusing. You were never meant to process hundreds of inputs a minute. Endless feeds, constant updates, comparison, judgment, noise. And then you're told to just focus or have more discipline? That's like blaming a car for skidding on black ice without acknowledging the storm. So here's the quiet truth. Your brain adapted to survive, not to thrive in overstimulation. The loop, the compulsive checking, the scrolling, the frozen anxiety, was your nervous system's best attempt at managing an unmanageable world. You didn't fail. You coped. Small reminder. Every moment you step away, every breath you take outside the loop, every gentle no to more input is a reclaiming of yourself. If this helped you see your loops with less shame and more grace, tap follow, not to boost numbers, but to tell Spotify you want more of this kind of signal. Something real, quiet, true. The loop doesn't end when the episode does.
It waits in your pocket, on your desk, in your browser, in the back of your mind. A flicker, a buzz, a scroll, a moment of silence that feels too loud, and your hand reaches without thinking. It's not your fault. The loop is engineered, but it's also deeply emotional, because sometimes distraction feels safer than clarity. Dopamine is easier than doubt. Control is easier than feeling powerless. But what if we paused? What if the next time that loop calls, you didn't answer with shame, but with a question? What am I avoiding right now? What part of me needs attention, not avoidance? Not to fix it, not to fight it, just to notice. That's the crack, where freedom begins. Episode 4 is called Craving Control, Avoiding Chaos: Why Dopamine Isn't the Villain. We'll break down why motivation gets hijacked, how dopamine really works, and how you can slowly shift from compulsive reaction to conscious action without relying on shame. If this episode softened something inside you, follow the podcast. It helps us reach more minds like yours. Quiet ones, curious ones, tired ones, ready to take back a little peace. Sleep well, or stay awake. Just stay aware. The loop doesn't end, but neither does your awareness. And that changes everything.